airports around the country due to the strike at SAA. Let's go now to the King Shaka International Airport. It's where we find my colleague Ayanda Mhlongo. Ayanda, very good morning to you. What's happening there?
Yeah, good morning to you, Blaine. Good morning to our viewers. Well, we're here at the first level of King Shaka Airport, just in front of the SAA check-in counters. I'm just going to move out of shot a little bit for my colleague Tulani there to show us. It has been pretty quiet since this morning, Blaine. We have seen some passengers come through. Many of them, of course, are being turned away. Some of them moving from the check-in counters to the SAA ticket office, where they have been trying to get refunds as well, but also assistance in terms of how they're going to be able to get the flight, whether SAA is going to be able to facilitate them leaving here through and using other airlines. We had an opportunity to speak to two passengers earlier on. One gentleman, he seemed a little bit frustrated, but he said there was nothing, of course, that he could do. Said he wasn't aware that the flights had been grounded and arriving here this morning and been turned away, and he said that he was told that the flights had been cancelled until Sunday and that he should possibly come back here on Monday. And they also then mentioned to him that he's unfortunately not going to be able to get a refund, but they could rebook a flight for him for Monday. We also spoke to another passenger from Germany, and he said, well, that these things happen, and he seemed that he understood the situation, saying that SAA had assisted him to get another airline. Unfortunately, he'd have to wait about 3 hours before leaving King Shaka to our Tambo, and from there he's then going to be connecting to Germany. But he said that fortunately he is going to be making that connecting flight to Germany. Some of the passengers a little bit more frustrated, not wanting to speak to us here, but we could just see them on their phones moving up and down, looking a little bit visibly frustrated, having been turned away. But many passengers here being told that they should come back at least on Monday to find out whether or not the situation has been resolved. And of course, we've seen the protests this morning in our Tambo and the other airports, but here in KwaZulu-Natal it has been pretty quiet from this morning. When we came in, we were expecting to see some of the striking workers outside the airport, but it was quiet. But to get more information in terms of the plans for the striking workers here in KwaZulu-Natal, I'm now joined by Elton Gordon. He's an official of NUMSA here in the province of KwaZulu-Natal. Elton, good morning. Thank you so much for agreeing to chat with us. I was just speaking about visuals that we saw coming from my colleagues who are in our Tambo as well as Cape Town Airport. But here in KZN, it seems quiet outside. Just give us a picture in terms of where are your members.
Okay, thank you for the opportunity. I think in KZN, all NUMSA members have heeded the call to go on a protected strike in pursuit of their wage demands. I think the people that we see at the counter are either non-members or members of another union called NTM, but all our members have heeded the call. In terms of their attendance, the bad weather in KZN has had an adverse effect on our strike. Because of the predictions which were given to us, our members decided that it would be safer for them to stay at home today. And the main reason for that is that because the airport is a national key point, our picketing area in King Shaka International Airport is the R102, which have made it extremely difficult for them to get caught up in the storm. But all our members have heeded the call, and I can safely tell you that all local and international flights have been grounded as a result of this strike.
We've had no word yet, Alton. Of course, we're now waiting in terms of, you said the negotiations are happening at with your national leaders. But today, obviously, the bad weather, and we know that's a situation here in Durban and other parts of KwaZulu-Natal. But passengers are being told that they must come back on Monday, which the possibility of that there is no resolution, that the strike could continue. Are you expecting maybe in the next coming days that your members will then come out to the R1 one or two to possibly protest or picket?
Yes, definitely. I think firstly, let me begin by saying that I've received confirmation from our national office that the company has agreed to a Section 150 facilitation. What that basically means is that the CCMA has to come in and try to find the resolution between the two parties. Now, the speed of that process will obviously be determined by whether employers put anything on the table, and if that is put, we would then have to take it back to our members, being a worker control trade union, and they would have to give us a mandate. But yes, in terms of the protest action, definitely, if the strike proceeds, we're obviously hoping it can be resolved as soon as possible, but that will depend on attitude of the employer. But if the strike does proceed, we will definitely go to the picketing area as soon as the weather clears up.
All right, Elton, thank you so much for your time. Elton Gordon there on behalf of NUMSA here in the province of KwaZulu-Natal, of course, explaining to us that due to the bad weather, their members have not been able to come out, but will indeed do so. Now, before I hand to my colleague Arabile Gumede, who is in Tambo, I must also say, Blaine, that we could expect more passengers come through. Of course, you'd know that in Durban there were two international conferences that were being held this week. Those conferences wrap up today, and a lot of those guests, the international delegates that had attended that conference, are expected to be leaving Durban today. So we could see a number of passengers come through if they had not been able to make alternative arrangements and book other flights. But of course, we are going to be here at the airport monitoring what is happening here and also speaking to passengers. We leave it here for now, and as I said, let's cross now to my colleague Arabile Gumede in Johannesburg. Arabile, good morning and over to you.
Yeah, good morning, Ayanda. Look, it certainly has been, as you make note of, their situation where the unions have played their part, certainly stating the course and saying that they will stay the course when it comes to the scenario and the situation at hand, seemingly all around the country, yourself and myself included, unions saying that they will not back down from the course that they currently follow unless their demands are certainly met. So it becomes then a very difficult situation now as to where exactly does SAA go from here. They sit with a debt pile of at least 9.2 billion rand, and that's just over the next 3 years, which government has said that they're willing to pay when it comes to the government guaranteed debt level there. So that will be of keen interest to kind of find out and see exactly where that sits and where that stands. Now, continuing to try and get the latest then out of the entire scenario, the question becomes, how much does SAA stand to lose in this regard? Well, here are the numbers then for you. 52 million rand a day at the very least is how much they stand to lose. So that's 104 million across just 2 days. Then you also, of course, have the scenario where they haven't turned a profit since 2011. 28 billion rand is how much they've cost taxpayers over the last 13 years at the very least. So the numbers continue to stack up. But indeed, the non-executive director then at SAA was speaking to Scopa, and it was a very, very tense situation not so long ago, having spoken then and said that SAA is in a difficult one and that technically it's insolvent. But if they were to prepare their financials in accordance with that notion, it could even be catastrophic. Let's listen in to Mark Kingston now.
We could prepare them on a liquidation basis. To do that, we have to place the company into liquidation. There are some consequences that I have to say are catastrophic in the context of placing SAA into liquidation. In no order of importance, the first is that all of the loan agreements accelerate. It's a default under the loan agreements and under the lease agreements. You'll be well aware of the fact that we have 9.2 billion rands worth of debt that comes due, and we've had to shunt, I would say, from month to month. But our leases on the planes also will be accelerated. So we're not talking about 9 billion rands worth of obligations. We're talking about in excess of 40 billion rands worth of obligations that have to be settled immediately. Immediately. That has knock-on effects for the country much more broadly, not just for the airline.
Well, clearly Martin Kingston highlighting, of course, that it's not just the 9 billion rand, right? That certainly needs to be made. Over $40 billion worth of commitments need to be set in stone. So the question here, however, is that because their financials needed to be handed in at a very short stage and they couldn't do so, the question becomes, well, what happens from here on in? Have they considered all other options before looking at a restructuring, before looking at retrenchment of at least 944 staff as well, then nearly 20% then of the staff that are unionized, of course. So the question that those MPs wanted to know is, was it something that they've considered? Have they considered all the options? Let's listen in on that too.
Martin, you've painted a very bleak picture, and I have no doubt that it's accurate, but I think there's some options that you haven't considered or haven't mentioned. Why is the board not looking at business rescue?
To place the company into business rescue, and we've received legal advice on this, there needs to be a realistic prospect of achieving that outcome. To achieve that outcome, we need to access the self-same liquidity that we've been unable to access to date. The receipt of the commitment to repay the 9.2 billion rands worth of debt is a significant proportion of that obligation that has disappeared. But if we can't see our ability to secure the requisite liquidity to be solvent for the next 12 months, then we can't place ourselves in business rescue.
Well, clearly sentiment is clear then, isn't it? That certainly it is a dire situation for SAA. They need to pick up the slack from here on in, and they need to find the right way from here. Well, it is just gone after 11 o'clock. Of course, we are expecting to get an update as well from the spokesperson of SAA, Tladi, with regards to whether the strike action will continue further. Of course, talks are continuing between unions and SAA as well. It is one they need to make sure does end amicably, and indeed very soon. The Minister of Public Enterprises has said that SAA is not too big to fail, but we certainly hope it doesn't have to. Blaine.
All right, Arabile, thank you very much indeed for your reporting. We will try to come back to you in a short while. Remember, this is an indefinite strike. That's what the unions are telling us. And SAA, we know, operates just over 100 flights a day, which will cost the airline about over 50 million rand a day. And Arabile, all right, we'll come back to Arabile in a short while, but we have